I know I sometimes impress you. There was that time in
yeah.
1988. Remember that time?
Often.
And I'm going to impress you again by telling you that on this day, the 19th of October, in 1973, The Way We Were was a movie that was released on this day. Status Quo completed their Australian tour by coming back to Melbourne's festival in 1975. In 2000, The Dish, the film.
I love that dish. I love that dish.
The Dish.
I love that film.
That was released. As we mentioned earlier, there was a whole stack of people who had birthdays. The one person we did miss was Gary Pankhurst. He had a birthday today. Who do you reckon he is?
I know that name.
Do you?
Yeah, no, that doesn't help.
He was Skippy. He was Sonny and Skippy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Other songs released on this day, as we said before, Ringo Starr, Photograph, Steve Miller, his band put out the album called The Joker. Ted Mulry, we mentioned, Jump in My Car. Sonny Boy's album, it goes on. 1998, Cher released Believe. It was the first single to use auto-tune, you know.
This is how clever you are when you just tap into someone else's knowledge.
Take complete credit for everything. No, I shouldn't. That came from a book called For the Record, Volume 3, and the man who put that together is a man called Steve Woods. And if I'm not mistaken, I reckon if I say hello, Steve, he'll say hello, Neil.
Hello, Neil. How are you?
Good, thanks, mate. You got Rob, the other one you've already had a chat to. Now, before we start talking about the book, I just need to make a confirmation, if I can. I purchased both Volume 2 and Volume 3 yesterday to go with my Volume 1. You're not going to deliver them page by page via text like you did today, are you? I'm actually going to get the actual books.
I can confirm it's been shipped.
Oh, that's a relief because, to be honest, reading on a phone was pretty hard. And, if I'm going to have to get one of those every day, it's going to drive you nuts and it's going to drive me nuts as well.
Steve, it is a plethora of, some people might say, useless information, but for those of us who are always
fills up a radio program every Saturday morning.
Well, those of us intrigued about historical events and just little snippets that come with things that are part of our life all the time, and it might be, as you were talking about off air, how somebody got to play bass guitar on one of the greatest albums ever produced in Australia by pure accident. Those little stories I just love, and I guess you just love finding them.
Well, see, I don't think they're useless information because we all lived it. And the thing that worries me most about Australian culture is that we are so dominated with American media that some really big events are slowly fading away. Things like Rocktober concerts that we used to have at the Myer Music Bowl, and they'd get 30,000 people turning up to see Thin Lizzy. The Skyhooks sort of playing in Geelong, and it was just like a major town event when they were there. And I know a lot of your audience are probably thinking, well, hang on, I was there. In fact, one of the things, actually, that I was flipping through the book for October 19 is something that I went to in 1988. Mick Jagger, who was feuding with Keith Richards at the time, had decided to do an Australian solo tour. Keith was livid over this, and he also replaced Keith Richards with a guy called Joe Satriani on guitar. And but in the middle of the tour, Mick Jagger decided to do a show at the Corner Hotel in Richmond. Now, only about 700 people could get in, but they absolutely flooded the intersection of Swan Street and Lennox Street in Richmond. You couldn't move because the rumour was, would Mick Jagger play at this little pub in Richmond? Well, lo and behold, yes, he did. And it was actually filmed for Channel 9 and became part of a TV sort of special documentary that they were filming of that tour, which I think you can find on YouTube these days. But I was there. I was shoulder to shoulder trying to get into seeing Mick Jagger. He was playing as the Brothers of Sodom, which I thought was questionable. And but how amazing! And there were people there, but people, as time goes on, it starts to sort of fade away, and that's why I started to write these books. And I thought, well, for the record, let's just get it out there, because so many books that talk about pop culture and things like that are written in America or the UK, and they don't include stuff that we know about here, like Countdown and Rocktober. Those sorts of things. And so so when I started to do these books, they became sort of just a historical almanacs, I suppose. But on the same, what I started to realise, I need to make these as Australian or Victorian, Melbourne, Geelong as possible, because there are people that actually went to these things and they go, oh, hang on, it's like the Seekers playing at the Myer Music Bowl and having like nearly a sort of a quarter of Melbourne turning up to see them back in the days because of the population size. And even the Beatles tour, was so big, and yet it is now 60 years ago. And I think, look, we've got to get this documented. So the books even have, this is what the set list was, this is how much the tickets were, here's a support band for that Rocktober concert. You might recall, I mean, even Skyhooks for the 10th Rocktober did their, like almost a farewell tour at Olympic Park. And again, sort of a huge crowd turning out to that. And it was 10 concerts for $10. 10 bands for $10. And again, I've got the whole list of who actually played there. So I think the record books are really important. They're a great walk down memory lane.
Rob's got his shoes and socks off trying to work out if it was 10 bands for $10, how much on average was it per band? He's still working on it. So if he goes quiet for a while, yeah?
I got it.
Okay.
I haven't got the theme for today's music, but I've got the mathematical problem. Steve, dinner party, backyard barbecue situation. Do you find that you now have the notoriety that people say, hey, Steve, can you tell us this? Or is there times where people are talking and they might have the wrong answer and Steve knows the right answer and you think, oh, no, I'll let them go. How do you deal with that?
Well, I know that whenever there's a trivia night on, I suddenly start getting really bizarre text messages.
Yeah. You and me both, and they don't realise I'm reading it out of your book.
They're texting from under the table. Steve, tell us the answer to such and such. But look, I mean, they're great fun, these books. All this information actually started doing radio shows in Geelong, and they became a program which was called My Generation, which went all over Australia. I think probably the local station would probably be Gold FM in Melbourne that used to, with John O'Coleman hosting it. We went for 2 hours and we'd look back at a certain year. The more we got into all of this, we suddenly realised the more local and the more Australian you can make these shows, people really start to sort of connect with it. And I also realised that, look, I mean, talking about who was Prime Minister in whatever year, I mean, people go, yeah, whatever. But, to talk about how much a loaf of bread was or what rock concert actually, or what album came out, and you think, oh, hang on, I used to have that poster on my wall. They're the things that I think really grab people by the heart. And so this is the third book in the series now, and there's some amazing stuff. I mean, even I'm astounded that I've actually found it.
A touch of the Greg Normans. I'm in awe of myself. But it's interesting you mentioned the Corner Hotel, and it ties in with what you're talking about. I was asked nicely by two people with whom I live to go to the Rod Laver Arena on Monday night to pick them up after having seen Olivia Rodrigo performing at Rod Laver Arena, and we walked past the Corner Hotel coming back, and I think to myself, and explained this to the young lady concerned, she's 21, if you spin around on your heels when you look back and you look down what is now called Olympic Boulevard, and you've got Amy Park and you've got the Collingwood footy ground, the practice ground and stuff, and the tennis centre on the right hand side, just being able to remember when I was 21 that on the left-hand side, as you look down, you had Olympic Park, a running track. You had what in those days was the Sports and Entertainment Centre. It's really about capturing a time, almost like a time capsule thing, isn't it?
Oh, very much so. But even when you're standing in Richmond, I've got two boys, and every time we drive through Richmond, I bore them senseless about, the Council Club and the Corner Hotel, and all these Richmond pubs that we used to get a gig guide, like on a Wednesday night, and you would plan your weekend because In Excess are playing there and AC/DC are playing somewhere else. And I remember Greedy Smith was talking to me years ago. He said that being in a band in the 80s, he said, was like people would support you like football teams. And he said you would arrive at these venues, but he said people would follow you from venue to venue. You might be doing 2 or 3 shows in an evening, and they're travelling, all over the Melbourne suburbs and down to Geelong, and even LRB's got their start in Geelong, where they made up their name for the band on the way down there.
Ironically, we spoke of that after I played a song called Kings of the World by Mississippi earlier today. We talked about that. Yeah. Another thing that I foolishly invest a lot of money in, and they're now sitting on my shelf looking back at me. I bought the box set of Division 4 and probably about 15 box sets of Homicide, and using that as a time capsule as well. And, the tram being caught on the corner of Burwood Road and Glenferrie Road, and you go, hang on, I used to work just over there, and that's a different... It's a really interesting thing to go back on.
Well, look, you're not going to believe this, but one of my very best friends has actually done exactly the same thing with those 2 box sets, and he's fascinated with the model of Ford Falcon that they're using as a police car in the particular scene. And, it's not really the plot line that he's watching. He's watching
Correct.
What it used to look like.
Because you know what? Generally, they get the criminal. And I couldn't work out, obviously crime in Melbourne is probably worse than it was in the late 1960s, but how did we get through with only 3 members of the homicide squad? They must have been really busy.
Well, I think they were very efficient.
They were. They solved it every week.
Another interesting thing that came up during the week, I was talking to another friend of the show, Ross Stevenson, about this one. He said name dropping. He was talking about people now being older than they younger than they were when they were old previously, if you know what I mean. And Elwyn Kurtz, who was Chief Inspector Fox in the Homicide, how old do you reckon he was when he was filming Homicide?
Well, probably 45.
51.
And he looked 86.
Extraordinary.
Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
But when I started at 3DB, and I think back to Jeff McComas was a big radio name in the day, and he was like sort of like an assistant, sort of an administration manager or something rather. But Jeff used to sit in his office smoking a pipe, and but I used to look at him as if he's the oldest man I've ever seen in my life. And I think back, and I'm thinking, God, he must have only been about 45, 50 years old.
Yeah.
But they had Brill cream, and they had the big rimmed glasses, and to a young sort of silly boy at the age of 18. Stan Rofe worked in the building as well. I didn't know who Stan Rofe was. And as time goes on, you sort of you're working with royalty.
And that whole thing about Melbourne 1975. I caught 10 minutes the other day of the movie They're a Weird Mob.
Yeah.
And Sydney, 1966, and looking at that, having lived in Sydney for a year as well, 5 or 6 years ago, just looking at the incredible differences, and kind of, you see them now with people on Facebook, they get the photos and they merge the old and the new. It's just fascinating stuff.
Absolutely. And look, again, just getting back to these books, that's why these books are giving you a snapshot of life over the decades, and you're looking back and you're thinking, well, I was there for some of that. Some of it I remember looking at sort of like at an old black and white photo. But it is Australia, and it is up in this region, and you sort of think, well, if we don't kind of grab onto this stuff and hold on to it, it's going to slowly fade away. And the one thing I do really love about these books is it doesn't really matter what age the reader is. They're getting something out of it, because they'll be flipping through the book thinking, oh, well, this is all very interesting, but all of a sudden they're gravitating to what was going on in their teenage years, or what we call the formative years. And they're going, oh my goodness, this TV show, I used to watch that every night, and I used to listen to that radio station, I bought that album, and suddenly it's like you've opened up sort of a Pandora's box of their youth. And that's what I love about these books in particular. So they're a brilliant gift.
And now, Steve, you have made it very easy for us, because you've created the book, and we now have somewhere to go. And every page, I have no doubt, you will have an eyebrow-raising moment. But for you now, I sense you're still seeking these eyebrow-raising moments. But where do you go to find the stuff to put in the books?
Well, you've got to draw a line in the sand, otherwise you start going mad. But because you continually have the radar up for little bits of information. It's amazing how much information is broadcast and it's incorrect with respect to our industry. Right.
Oh, you have been listening this morning then?
Well, I was listening to one radio station that was telling me that... was it Whispering Jack was the Thriller album was a huge album back in the 70s, and I thought, really?
1984, would that be right?
83, 84.
Yeah.
But I thought to myself, it's just little detail things like that, and I'm thinking that the further we move away from that, that then becomes normalised. And
that was sort of my point before, that when you're in the background and you hear that in a public forum, do you just bite your tongue, or do you occasionally wander up and say, "Excuse me, guys, actually"?
Well, I kind of think to myself, I think I better go and double check that, because occasionally you do hear something and you think, I don't believe I've actually heard that story before, and then lo and behold, it turns out to be true. One of the interesting things was you have Daryl Braithwaite's One Summer, and the guy who's singing the chorus is John Farnham.
Wow.
The high notes, because Farnham can get the high notes and Braithwaite couldn't. And, all of a sudden I was talking to John's, Farnham's backup singers, and all, yes, that's true. So so you're madly sort of adding to this incredible sort of melting pot of things that have happened to us, but things that we all know about, we all lived it. The interesting thing is that when you actually go onto the internet, you sort of think, it'll all be there. The internet really kicked in about 1990, so anything prior to 1990 is very sketchy with details. In fact, things like Rocktober concerts, for instance, I thought, this will be easy. I'll just call up, Rocktober each year and sort of see who played. Not much information on the internet about it, and I'm thinking, goodness me, this is difficult. And then one day, I accidentally clicked on images on Google rather than news. Well, lo and behold, there are the tour posters that someone's put up, and there's the tour poster with here's all the supporting bands and how much the tickets cost and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, and yet there's nothing in writing that actually supports any of this.
And I think a lot of the stuff too, and you've touched on it a couple of times, there's the factual stuff. Mick Jagger played at the Corner Hotel in 1988. That's great, and that's really interesting. But it's the memories and the stories that go with it. You were there with your mate, and that's the stuff that the internet's really good at. And people putting those posters up, why are they putting the posters up? Because they were there. Tell us about your experience. Tell us what was going on the day.
I'll tell you another band that played at the Corner Hotel very soon after Mick Jagger was Pink Floyd.
Wow.
They played as a band called The Fishermen. And I got a phone call from one of the record company people, and they said, do you want to pop down and have a look at a new band that's coming out? And I've sort of gone there, and there are about 50 people in the Corner Hotel, and so I just gravitate to where the free drinks were. and not particularly interested in the band. But anyway, the band starts playing things like Stevie Wonder covers and sort of really fantastic sort of funk songs. And what Pink Floyd had done is all the backup singers were now the lead singers, and Pink Floyd were now the backup band. And then the guy starts playing guitar, and I've got my back to the band, and I'm thinking, God, this sounds like David Gilmour. And I turned around, and lo and behold, there's David playing guitar. And I just nodded at me, and they just said Pink Floyd. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. And it was literally like a night off that they had in Melbourne, and rather than sitting around in a hotel room, okay, well, let's go off. And also, can you imagine the relief for Pink Floyd to actually go out and not play Pink Floyd songs?
Yeah.
Imagine being the bloke who runs the Corner Hotel. Hey, listen, Pink Floyd wouldn't mind coming down and having a strum. Is that okay?
Well, the thing is, and also, I saw Robbie Williams in a club in South Yarra because they were desperately trying to break Robbie Williams in Australia because he'd had hits like Angels and Millennium. But at the time, we were very much into Jimmy Barnes and the Angels and that sort of stuff. So no radio station was giving him or Kylie Minogue any real airplay. And lo and behold, there he is in front of 100 people belting it out. I remember saying to someone on the night, I said, gee, I tell you what, because he's so funny in between the songs. And I said, if the music career doesn't work out, I said, give him his own Tonight.
Yeah, he is a genuine all-round entertainer, that gentleman.
So all that sort of information is in the books as well. So it's kind of like you go through this new book that I've put out, which is called As the Days Go By. There's a page for every day of the year. We talk about all the sort of the events that took place, the hit singles that actually got released on this day, like certain dates of the year, and you think, boy, I tell you what, if you ever wanted a hit single, today's the day to release it. You're in good company.
Yeah. The one that staggered me about today, and it was the fact that Robert Reed, who played Mike Brady in the Brady Bunch, as distinct from playing the one that got up there, Kazali, would have been 92 today.
Amazing, isn't it?
Which means I must be getting on into my 40s if that's the case.
Steve, I must say, Wednesday night I had the privilege of listening to two gentlemen, Cole Hutchison, AFL and Geelong Footy Club historian, and Bob Gartland, who's put together a club museum and his own personal collection of stuff that is available for the public. There's stuff that is connected to history, and I thank them for the work that they do, which is a labour of love. But to you also, thanks for what you do, because you're a great argument solver, you're a great conversation starter. You clearly love what you do, but to actually put it into book form and have it available for us, it's greatly appreciated. And well done on your work, and thanks again for your time this morning and previous conversation.
Oh, look, no, it's my pleasure. And look, it's an easy read. I've tried to keep it as point form as possible so that you don't have to plough through stuff that you don't really care about to get to the good stuff. It's all killer, no filler, as they say. The only place you can buy it at the moment is actually on the website. So if you go to fortherecordbook.com.au, so it's fortherecordbook.com.au, there they all are. And if you're looking for something for Christmas, it's a no-brainer.
And for those listening who were thinking, oh, that's something I'll get Neil for Christmas, no, I now have the set. Two I was missing have been shipped. But Steve,
if you're listening, Chris Crinkle.
Yeah. But am I right in saying about $130 for the three? Is that right? Have I sold it cheap?
No. The interesting thing is when you're sort of purchasing it, the postage can become such a killer.
Yeah.
And so I actually then decided, well, look, why don't we try and put some bundles together? It sounds like obviously you're going to make more money out of it, but put the bundle together because it saves on the postage.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, our bundles turned out to be the number one seller by far. People, I'd say probably 95% of our sales are people buying the set rather than buying them individually.
Yeah, well, when I bought my first one, I did buy the set because there's only one of them. So now I'm penalised, I might add, by having to buy 2 and 3 separately. But that's okay. We're happy to support you on that one. Just again, fortherecordbook.com.au.
Yep, the information started in Geelong, and look what's happened.
Good on you, mate. Love what you do. Well done.
Look out. I reckon almost certainly there'll be an order coming through this week from a chap called Grant Bench. Good morning, Grant. You'll be listening. He told me, because we had Steve Scaines on with his chart book, 15 minutes before the show finished, Steve had another order. I got a funny feeling you might see one coming through. So if Grant sends one through, make sure you scribble your name in the front for him.
Can even do that for you.
Thanks, Steve. Steve Woods, great to chat. We'll chat again down the track, I have no doubt.
Thanks, mate. Good luck.